Hi everybody. Welcome to this first video on Aristotle, first of two. And boy, Aristotle, uh, one of the greatest philosophers of all time. What an understatement, friends. I mean, you just have to be familiar with Aristotle's work and his influence throughout history. So you truly appreciate what an amazing thinker this man was. Aristotle was definitely the first philosopher with a sort of scientific mindset, let's say a scientific approach to things. And he studied pretty much everything that could be studied in antiquity. Science, biology, philosophy, politics, theology, everything, every single thing, art. So, and he did it with the same mindset, right? The scientific mindset. In this video, I want to address just a couple of things, only two things from Aristotle's work. The first one is his one aspect of his biology, his take on biology, that I consider very, very important. And the other thing I want to address is his approach to truth. Okay, so let's start with biology. The textbook that I use for this class is called the Great Conversation. It's a great textbook, probably the best textbook that I've used since I've been a higher education instructor. And at the beginning of the chapter, chapter 9 on Aristotle, the first description you get about Aristotle is that he is a man much more down to earth compared to his master, let's say, Plato. Plato, as um, as you might recall from my previous videos, Plato was always concerned about ideas, right? Big ideas, higher forms, because he considers that these are the foundations of everything, of reality. So Plato, it's famously depicted in this picture by Raphael, right, with his finger pointing upwards, because that was the emphasis that there, where you have to look, we have to look to understand reality. We have to look at the world of ideas up above or something like that. And with Aristotle, no, you're going to see a guy doing the opposite. He's going to be looking downwards. He's going to be looking at things, at nature, plants, animals. So Aristotle was fascinated by biology. And this is one of the things that he studied. He spent most of his time studying life, things that we can see. So, thus, a more down to earth thinker. And an aspect about his biology that I want to address here is his take on development. I think it's just fascinating. Aristotle looked at plants, he looked at insects, animals, and he noticed that there's a path of development, right? And the textbook uses the example of a frog. Okay, so frog, at the beginning, it's an egg, and then it evolves into a tadpole, and then with time he develops legs and eyes, and then evolves into a frog, right? And Aristotle noticed in living beings, they have this pattern of development, and it's always the same pattern for each particular species, right? For frogs, it's the same pattern. For butterflies, it's the same pattern, right? Going back to being caterpillars and then turning into butterflies. It's just the same development for every single species. And he uses very interesting terminology. You might consider it fancy, but he was trying to be scientific about everything, right? So Aristotle thought of this inner potential of beings to develop into what they were supposed to develop. He calls it enteleki, right? So it's a Greek word, obviously, enteleki. And he says that every species has that potential to become fully actualized, okay, in their developmental progress, let's say, or in their development. So, for example, looking at a seed, Aristotle would say, well, if we consider a seed, the entelechy for becoming a plant or a tree is there, is present inside the seed. So once that seed it's put underground and it receives the right nutrients and the right climate and so on and so forth, it will turn into a plant and then it will grow and one day it'll turn into what it's supposed to be, right? It'll become fully actualized. Another terminology that Aristotle came up with, things becoming fully actualized. And that's quite an idea, don't you think? That everything, every living being has a potential, an inner potential to become a concrete thing. That inner potential, again, being the entelechy. Every living being has that entelechy, a very specific pattern of development in a very specific direction towards a very specific goal of development. So in the case of the frog a frog is more fully actualized when it can do all things that frogs are supposed to do, right? Hopping, catching flies, and doing that sort of thing. So this is what a frog is meant to become, or a tadpole is meant to become. This fully actualized, fully developed frog, capable of doing all these things, all the things that frogs are supposed to do, that they do. So, okay, so that's an idea. And Aristotle thought that the same is the case with human beings, right? That human beings have a very particular path of development. And I remember discussing with students recently, a student said to me that supposedly our brain is fully developed when we are 24, 25. Okay, that's when our brain is fully developed, our brain physically, right? But that got me thinking about, in the case of human beings, there's two kinds of development. Okay, there's the physical development and there's psychological development. And this is something that Aristotle did not have, probably did not realize that in the case of human beings, there's actually two paths of development. That's interesting. Frogs will always develop the same way and they will always do the same things once they're fully actualized or fully developed. The intellect is the same for frogs. The intellect is the same for all other species, for dogs, for sharks, for any kind of living species. But with us, it's different, right? Yes, a human being might be considered at 24 to be fully actualized physically, but not psychologically. And the psychology of human beings seems to be the really, really important part. Not that not the physical development is not important. I'm not saying that at all. But I would say maybe the most appropriate thing to say is that both are very, very important. Both path of development, the physical and the psychological development. But again, Aristotle did not realize and thus did not pay attention to psychological development. He would say, though, he would tie, uh, uh, now thinking about it, he would tie the idea of psychological development to ethics. That's what he would do. That's what he actually did. For Aristotle, the goal of human beings, psychologically speaking, is to be happy, to reach eudaimonia, a state of happiness, and that it's tied to his morality, his ideas of morality, virtue. So the psychological end of human beings is to become good people, virtuous people, moral people. Why? Because this virtue is what leads to happiness. And in the end, this is what we all seek, right? We all want to be happy. We all, human beings, all of us, right? As a species, every single one of us want to be happy, right? Don't we? So Aristotle would say, well, yeah, if you want to be happy, the path to happiness is virtue, it's morality. Okay, so I guess that's the psychological development in Aristotle's work, in Aristotle's philosophy. But um, but I would say though, not to attack Aristotle. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to attack or object to his philosophy, but rather I would like to complement his philosophy with what we know now about human psychology. And and what I have in mind, or who I have in mind, is Abraham Maslow. I'm a big fan of Maslow. All my students know that. And Maslow, I would say he nailed it when he came up with the pyramid, the hierarchy of needs. And let me show you on the next slide what I mean. Okay, I'm sure many of you, if not most of you, have seen this illustration, the pyramid of needs, hierarchy of needs. And you might be thinking right now, well, this relates to needs rather than psychological development. But I would argue it just points to the same thing, to the same facts about human psychology. That, okay, looking at the bottom category, physiological needs. So we all have physiological needs. We need water, we need food, we need shelter. Okay, all of us, we need that. Once we have that, once that is taken care of, once that is not a problem, then we tend to look at the next level of needs. And I'm thinking psychologically, right? That's once we have these things, food, shelter, we will still not feel complete, right? Like, okay, like I'm done with life. I have everything I need. No, we would aspire to more things. So, and this is the next level of needs. This is the next thing that we will look at. Safety and security, health, employment, right? Some stability, financial stability, having property, having stuff, right? Having your own car, your clothes, having a house, and having a family, right? These things are necessary. Now, once you have those two things, once you have your physiological needs taken care of and your safety and security needs, then people start feeling like, okay, I that's it. That's all what life is about. Well, look at the next level. Love and belonging. Now you need meaningful friendship, meaningful relationship, intimacy, a sense of connection, right? You need to feel like you belong to a group and whatever, you need that connection to people. Okay, and that's it. That's all there is to life, to happiness. Because again, these things, right, overlap. Would you agree? Happiness, psychological development, whatever. Once we have these things, and I've known people who have these things, the bottom three levels, they're still not fully satisfied with life. They still feel like there's something missing. Well, look at the next level: self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others, the need to be a unique individual. Oh boy. Because it's true. When you have a meaningful relationship, when you feel like you belong to a family, to a group of friends or organization, society, whatever, there's still that need, right? That you want to feel like you're your own person. You can assert your own ways of looking at things, your own opinions and stuff, and you want those views and opinions to be validated. So what you're reclaiming really is your individuality. This is something super important. Um, you don't want to feel like you're just going with the flow, that you're just one more clog in the machine, that you're somebody unique and people can identify you, can distinguish you from other people, right? That's cool. We need that. But I love achievement, feeling achieved, having the respect of others. This is huge, friends. Without even looking at the top, at self-actualization, without even looking at that. Um, how interesting, right? Actualization, right? That comes goes back to Aristotle. So Maslow, all right. Speaking of Aristotle's being influential, okay, Maslow was definitely somebody that Aristotle influenced with the idea of actualization, things being fully developed. So that's why we have this terminology in the pyramid, self-actualization. But again, without even looking at the top, at the very top of the pyramid, which is kind of strange. There's so much abstract ideas there, morality, creativity. Okay, but without looking at that, concentrating on self-esteem. I mean, isn't this like incredibly important for us as human beings? Like feeling like what we do matters and that we have the respect of other people, that we feel achieved, that we feel like, wow, that, we feel accomplished. This is so important. I would say many people, if not most people, friends, sadly, they don't feel that way. They have a job, they feel stuck, maybe doing the same thing for 20 years, maybe more. They don't feel accomplished. And therefore, on Sundays when they're thinking about going back to work the next day, they're not excited. They're like, oh, they're depressed. They can't wait to retire because they're not really happy doing what they're doing. That's the opposite of what we're reading here in self-esteem. Wouldn't you agree? Feeling achieved, feeling like accomplished, feeling like what you do matters because people respect you for who you are and for what you do. I had this conversation not too long ago with a student, and he said to me, we're just talking about professional goals and stuff, and he said to me that he wanted to get his certification for welding, that he wanted to be a welder, and I looked at him, and I told him very respectfully. I said, look, dude, that's great. You're pursuing that, but I'm going to tell you very respectfully, that's not really what you want to do. He said, what do you mean? I said, you don't want to be a welder. No. You know what you want to do? You want to be, you want to have your own welding company. You want to run your own show. You want to be the CEO, president, founder of your organization, your business, your welding business. If that's really the thing that you really like, you're passionate about. And you know why you want to be that person? Because it's going to make you feel accomplished. Because you're going to feel respected. When you introduce yourself to people, shake their hands, and you say, I'm so and so, and I'm the founder of X company, welding company. People are going to look at like you like, whoa, that's really cool. So you're your own boss? Yes. Wow. That's really, really cool. Who can brag about being their own boss? I mean, that's not very common, right? But you can be, and this is just an example, right? I'm not telling everybody, you should have your own business corporation and be your own boss. And that's not what I'm saying. Because, for example, me as an educator, I feel very accomplished. And when I introduce myself to people and they ask me, what do you do for a living? I say, I'm an educator. I teach philosophy. They're like, whoa, that's really cool. And I'm like, I know, it's great. It's great. Don't you want that for yourself? Okay. Anyways, this is what we want out of life. This is how we want to develop. This is who we want to be, who we want to become. And both Aristotle and Maslow would say we do have the potential. That entelechy, it's in you, it's in me, it's in everybody. The entelechy, the capacity, the inner potential to become all that we want to become, to live great lives. By that, I don't mean everybody has the potential to be the president of the United States. I'm not saying that. I mean, I just use the example of a welder, right? And having a welding company. The point is, whatever you want to pursue, you want to make sure that you develop or your life develops into somebody that others respect, that you feel accomplished and so on. You want that, and you want to feel like you're your own unique person. Who does not want that? So you see, people, human beings, right? We have these two paths of development: the physical slash physiological slash biological development. Yeah, at 24, yeah, you're fully developed. So thank you and have a great life. No, yeah, you can be 24, be fully developed physically, but then what about the psychological path? What about that? Well, once again, look at the pyramid, and that should give you a very clear idea of how you should go about your growth, your personal growth. Okay, food and shelter and house is not a problem. Okay, well, look for a job. You need financial stability. You need security. Okay, you have that already. You have a good job. Maybe you don't love your job, but it's a good job. Pays the bills and stuff, and you can afford things. You can afford property, right? A car and so on. You have that. Okay, well, keep going. You need a family. You need intimacy. You need to belong to to a group of people, friends, family, whatever. You need that. Okay, you have that. Okay, look at the next level. Do you feel achieved? Do you feel accomplished? Do you feel like proud of who or the person you have become? Do you take pride in what you do for a living? That's necessary, friends. And then, well, there's self-actualization, right? That's where individuals are fully what they can be, right? Fully actualized. When you have a sense of morality, of purpose, of higher purpose, I would say, right? When people say that a lot, you have to pursue something bigger than yourself. That's, I guess, that's what it's meant. Something like that, like pursue a higher goal. And religion, I think this is a place where you put religion. You believe in God. You believe you have a mission in life. That's it. That's super, super. That's at the top, actually, right? Do you feel that way? Even if you feel accomplished, do you feel like you're here to fulfill a mission? You were put in this planet to do something for humanity. You know what that is? That's at the top, friends. Meaning, experience, purpose, and so on. So quite an abstract category, right? The top category. So, okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to address in this video. Um, this take on biology and development. One thing for species, for living species, but it's a totally different thing for us. Because when we don't develop this way psychologically, well, I mean, as human beings, most of us are going to develop how we're supposed to develop physically. But psychologically, it's a whole different story, right? And some people really struggle with life, really struggle with life. And other people, uh, have been victims of circumstances, right? Family dysfunction, abuse, trauma, loss. And those things definitely impact your capacity, your ability to develop psychologically, to become fully actualized. And but those things we have to keep in mind, and we have to grow whatever circumstances, trauma. And well, you have a therapist, right, for that reason. When you feel stuck psychologically, or you feel like you're not in a good place, you're depressed, well, consult, right, a therapist, seek professional help, and keep this image in mind, because you want to feel like your life is great. And if you feel stuck, I would say this is a good way of looking at yourself, evaluating yourself, looking at that pyramid, and understanding exactly at what level you are stuck, at what level of development or needs. So, okay, for the last thing that I want to address in this video is Aristotle's take on truth. Aristotle, right? Let's say, he inherited from Plato, whom inherited the same thing from Socrates. This fight against skepticism, this fight against the sophist, right? And their claims that everything is relative, that we cannot know anything with certainty, that there's no certainty about anything, that objective knowledge is an illusion, and we're stupid if we think that there are things that are objectively true. So Plato inherited the same concern, let's say, from Socrates, and Aristotle inherited from Plato. So Aristotle understood that the way to understand that we do have knowledge is by first understanding how language works. And he paid a lot of attention to language. He came up with this discipline, this new discipline, logic. I mean, it's just incredible, the stuff that Aristotle produced, like his mind, an unbelievable mind. And logic basically shows you the rules of thinking in a way, right? How we should think. So with logic, you identify good ways of thinking from bad ways of thinking. And he made a very, very careful analysis of language, statements. And boy, it's all in the chapter, in chapter 9. But I don't want to spend too much time, because I mean this video will be endless. All I want to address though is that once you understand statements, once you understand how language works, the function of words, and you understand how to categorize words into substances, primary substances, secondary substances, and relationships, and that sort of thing. And once you know how to make a statement, understand what a statement is, Aristotle would say, well, now the next thing is to see if your statements about the world are true, because there is truth in the world. And Aristotle came up with this theory, and the textbook is called The Correspondence Theory of Truth. And basically is that your statements are true, or your beliefs are true. I'm going from statement to belief, but if you think about it, whatever thing you believe to be true, I mean, you can state it in a statement form, right? So thoughts and statements pretty much are the same thing. So, okay, I don't want to spend too much time discussing that, but for Aristotle, for me too, those two things are pretty much the same thing. Whatever you believe to be the case, whatever. I love coffee. Okay, I believe that to be true. I love coffee, but that's a statement. I love coffee, right? Is my statement true? Okay, once I understand how statements are formed, well, Aristotle would say, well, all you have to do is to see if your statement corresponds to a reality in the world, to a fact, a fact of the world. If your statements align with the reality of the world, then you can say your statement is true, it's correct. So to say, for example, uh, what can it be? I'm thinking of an example. To say, okay, cats are four-legged creatures. Okay, well, all you have to do, if that's your belief, and that's the statement, cats are four-legged creatures. Well, all you have to do is see if your statement, your belief, corresponds to the reality of cats. So that's pretty simple, right? Pretty simple to corroborate and to verify and say, yes, it's true. Cats are four-legged creatures unless they suffered from an accident and or some sort of genetic um, developmental failure, let's say. Um, we can say, generally speaking, that yes, it's true that cats are four-legged creatures. Okay, but so that for some of you who might be skeptical about the truth, and boy, there are students who are skeptical. Yesterday, I was texting with a former student who's a dear, dear friend of mine, and she was telling me about the same thing. She was skeptical about the whole idea of truth, and I said, well, some things are true. I mean, if I tell you my car has four doors, all you have to do is five doors, four doors for people, and one back door for groceries and things like that, right? Or my car has two headlights. How can you be skeptical about my statement? I mean, we all know these things are true, right? Cars normally have two headlights, and cars normally have four doors for people and one back door for things. So, how can you say that's not true? These things that I say, these examples I'm giving, corresponds to facts about the world. You can just go out and look and take a look at cars, pay attention, and you're going to see that it's actually true. Cars, most cars have four doors for people, passengers and driver, and then a back door. Okay, so, and there are other models. I get that. I get that. There's always exceptions, right? But even the exception, even if you make a claim or a statement about an exception, an exceptional car, the statement can be taken seriously and it can be considered true if we can actually see that your statement corresponds to an exception to the rule of car design, let's say. Now, Aristotle, though, missed a very important form of knowledge that another philosopher, a contemporary philosopher, we would say a modern philosopher, he died in 1970, Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell, another philosopher influenced by Aristotle, took sort of the same idea of the correspondence theory of truth, but he added a very, very important distinction or category of knowledge. So let's talk about it in the next and last slide. So here he is, right? Bertrand Russell. He came up with his own version of the correspondence theory of truth. Once again, after Aristotle. But he added something very, very significant, very important. Okay, so Russell said there are two types of things that we can consider to be knowledge, things that we can say we know. The first group is knowledge by acquaintance. This is one type of knowledge, knowledge by acquaintance. The other type of knowledge is knowledge by description. Okay, I'm using Russell's distinction. Russell says that knowledge by acquaintance is personal knowledge, is knowledge of things, statements that can only be, um, how can I say, that cannot be verified in an objective sense. Let me give you an example for clarification. Okay, to say um, like the Truman Show is the best movie ever. That's a statement. Um, Russell would say, well, that is an example of knowledge by acquaintance. The Truman Show is the best movie ever. It's a personal knowledge. And Russell would say that knowledge is true if you believe it to be true. Okay, so if I say The Truman Show is the best movie ever, and I say it and I believe it to be true, then my statement is true, according to Russell. It's true. Um, but you have to understand that's a type of knowledge, that's knowledge by acquaintance. To say that purple is my favorite color, same thing, knowledge by acquaintance. If I believe that to be true, then it's true. It's just true. If I say that I love cheesecake and it's my favorite dessert, if I say it and I believe that to be true, then it's true. It is absolutely true. But this is knowledge by acquaintance. The other type of knowledge, knowledge by description, it's very particular. There's something very particular about it. And the particular thing about it is that it can be verified. So if I say The Truman Show is the best movie ever, and I say it, right, like I mean it, well, people cannot verify that to be the case. They can't. So I guess they have to take my word for it. But if I say The Truman Show, the star of The Truman Show is Jim Carrey, okay, then Russell would say, then that qualifies as knowledge by description. Because people can indeed verify if what you're saying is true. If the star of the Truman Show is actually Jim Carrey, we can check. People, anybody can go and check and verify it. So knowledge by description can be true or it can be false. If the statement align or does not align to something factual about the world. And in this case, well, we have to verify if it is the case that Jim Carrey actually, factually worked and was the star of this movie, The Truman Show. Yeah, that's a fact about the world. And well, knowledge by description, therefore, is objective knowledge. So there you go. And objective knowledge, when it's true, well, it's absolutely true. And when it's not, it's false in an objective way. So there are a lot of things that we know that are true. So truth, it's real. It's a real thing. It's not like the sophists used to say, or the skeptics today, postmodernist thinkers today would say, no, everything is interpretation. Everything is interpretation. Nothing is absolutely true or absolutely false. There's no certainty in the word, in the world, and they love saying these things. But we know better, right? I mean, common sense, people, right? Common sense. Like really, like everything is an interpretation. You're gonna take that position about knowledge. So when you're driving and you see a red light, you don't know what to do, right? Like, should I stop? Should I go? People interpret red light as what? Let me see. Well, most cars, more drivers are stopping, but should I stop simply because everybody else is? And I'm sorry. No, I don't think anyone in the world goes through this mental conversation and trying to figure out what's the right interpretation about a red light or a green light. No, no, I'm sorry. No. These things are factually true or factually false. In this case, you see a red light when you're driving, it's factually true that you must stop. That's just it. When you see a green light, it's factually true that you must go. That's just the way it is. There's no other interpretation. There's no other way of interpreting. So there are truth in the world. There is certainty in the world. But it's true that there's this other category of knowledge that it's personal, that it's more difficult to assess in an objective way. Obviously, we're talking about subjectivity. We're talking about things that we feel to be true or feel to be the case. Once again, Truman Show is the greatest movie in the world. Chocolate is my favorite flavor. What's the other example I gave? Um, whatever. A cheesecake is my favorite dessert. Yeah, okay. These are subjective things that there's no way to verifying. But then we have to also be smart enough, man, commonsensical enough to distinguish different types of knowledge, a type of knowledge that can be verified and therefore can be considered objective and truth or false, factual, and so on. Simple as that. So all we have to do is corroborate, right? To see if statement, knowledge aligns with something in the world. So, gosh, it's incredible. I have to spend so much time explaining something that for probably most of you, it's just so obvious. Mr. Molina, you're describing the water. This is so obvious. Yeah, but for some philosophers, it's not. And uh, and I understand, but I don't understand at the same time. Uh, Skeptics, postmodernists, I don't know, man. I guess they're trying to be intellectual and be smart about whatever. Uh, the sophists who were the first skeptics, right, in antiquity in philosophy, they would say, well, a word cannot fully encapsulate the reality of the thing that it represents. For example, if you say tree, the word tree does not fully encapsulate the reality of a tree. And if you say tree, maybe everybody's going to have a different mental picture of a tree. Uh, so you cannot fully rely on words. Words are limited. Yeah, yes. And yet, we all know what a tree is. When we hear the word, we know what it is. Right? When we communicate with people about trees, we understand each other. Right? When we communicate to people about colors and colors in traffic lights, we all know, we all understand what we mean. There's no problem of interpretation. Oh, the word red does not fully encapsulate the reality of red. Whatever, dude. Whatever. Whatever. Okay, you want to live in that world, the postmodern world, the skeptic world? Gosh, I don't know how you can live. I don't know how you live. You wake up in the morning and you're thinking, am I awake? Or maybe not. Maybe I'm still dreaming. I feel hungry. Do I? Do I feel hungry? Is it just an interpretation? What am I supposed to do? I feel like going to the bathroom. Should I go? Uh, where's the bathroom? I've always used the bathroom. I always use that door over there to go to the bathroom, but maybe the bathroom will not be there this time. Maybe because there's no certainty about anything. Deep breath. Silly, right? Silly. There is room for skepticism in philosophy. Definitely. Definitely. You cannot take statement at face value. You cannot. That's not being a responsible philosopher, a responsible thinker. You cannot take statement like that, like, oh yeah, believe anything people say. No, 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 no. You have to be skeptical, but with a purpose. What's the purpose of skepticism? Good skepticism? You verify. You verify if what you're being told is true. Do your work. Do your due diligence. Do your research so you know what you know and why you know it. That's that's just how it is, right? All right, friends. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to join you again, or you join me again on the next video. Bye bye.